The audience was silent. The drums began to step up the tempo. The bass drum kept its beat dead on the timing of the human pulse. The girl's naked stomach started slowly to revolve in time with the rhythm. She swept the black feathers across and behind her again, and her hips started to grind in time with the bass drum. The upper part of her body was motionless. The black feathers swirled again, and now her feet were shifting and her shoulders. The drums beat louder. Each part of her body seemed to be keeping a different time. Her lips were bared slightly from her teeth. Her nostrils began to flare. Her eyes glinted hotly through the diamond slits. It was a sexy, pug-like face. Chien was the only word Bond could think of.
Welcome to the James Bond Complex. My name is Matt.
My name is Edgar.
And this guy on there, can you see your name?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? It's Emery.
The Intrepid.
Ooh.
Emery.
The Intrepid.
And together we are the James Bond Complex +1, I guess.
Welcome to the show. Welcome as a guest on your own show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think we should point out that this was booked before the decision was made.
Yeah, that's been booked a long time ago. But we are the James Bond Complex, a podcast that covers the entire James Bond phenomenon, from Fleming to film, and of course, everything in between. And well, for this episode, we're doing another the second edition, Fleming Second Edition. We are covering the second novel that he wrote, featuring
How ironic.
the world's most famous secret agent, James Bond 007. This was first released in 1954, and it takes place in New York, in Florida, in Jamaica, and it's a how should I say? It's a little bit controversial today for certain languages. Écart de langage, as we say in French.
Am I mistaken? Now, I have a few editions. Actually, one of the things we'll be talking about. I have a few editions. All of them have the original title to Chapter 5, but I'm aware, and maybe either you two could correct me if I'm making this up, but there is an updated version of Live and Let Die where the title of Chapter 5 is something like a Fun Night in Harlem or something like that. Because my Chapter 5 is not called. Read Chapter 5. It's not called A Fun Night in Harlem.
It's I don't remember when, but they stopped using that chapter title for quite a few years. I think it's recently they put it back in one of the more recent editions. Actually, I'm not entirely certain.
The original,
the Penguin edition.
It's in the Penguin. That's the one I have. The Penguin edition. That's I have the box set.
It's a beautiful box.
Yeah, it's amazing. I paid. It was on discount.
Phrasing, Edgar. I thought this is not the Archer season 2 episode.
That'll be my birthday episode. Yeah, I've seen that box. I'll see it every once in a while because I'll still do little eBay searches for the hardcover of the Austin Powers version, because that's the Casino Royale. I have a soft cover. I don't have the hardcover, so it's a Penguin edition. So I'll do Penguin Casino Royale, and sometimes that box will come up, but it's like $400.
Oh, it's insane. I paid. Yeah, I don't remember if I paid $50 for it, to be honest. I don't remember how much I paid. It was on discount, like 50% off. It was just ridiculous amount. I'm said sold.
I can imagine. So, Emery, as our esteemed guest,
yeah,
right. Why don't you tell us a little about your history with Fleming? When did you start reading them? Why did it strike you? Because we often talk about the the movies together, but we don't talk about that. We have talked about some continuation novels. Speaking of doing things ass backwards, welcome to a Fleming episode.
Right.
Yeah, what's your history with Fleming, and what's your history with Live and Let Die?
Well, for my history with Fleming, it really goes back. I really started with the movies at a very young age. I was probably 11 or 12 when I first watched Goldfinger. And I think I must have rented that video from the video store 100 times. Like, if I wasn't renting that, I was renting Back to the Future. It was really the only two movies that I would beg my parents to let me rent. Because I had a really personal connection with Goldfinger too. But I didn't start reading Fleming until high school. That's when I guess with Goldeneye, I kind of had a renewed interest in James Bond. So I kind of wanted to go back to the roots and actually read Fleming. And I think I kind of made the misstep in reading The Spy Who Loved Me first.
Okay.
Not really expecting it to be what it was. But then I finally read Goldfinger, and I didn't read the Fleming series as a whole until really much later. I started buying the Penguin editions after Casino Royale came out, but I did buy I would vacation every year near Kingston, Ontario, and there would be a used bookstore. So I would go in there, and every summer we would go, I would buy a new used book. And for the first couple of years, it was I picked up a couple of Gardners, but I finally got my hands on some Fleming. So from there it was For Your Eyes Only, the short story collection, and I'll have to double check. I think You Only Live Twice was the other novel that I picked up, the Pan editions, before I got the rest of the Penguin editions of the paperback. So I didn't really read Live and Let Die probably until, I want to say, 2007.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you have some of the Pan editions.
I have two Pan editions, and I'm not in my regular podcast room. I've got
it's so nice. You should make this your
it's a nice little shelf you got there, or a nice little.
This is all going to be moved eventually, but yeah. So I've got this Pan edition, For Your Eyes Only, that I got. Yeah, it's still in pretty good condition. I only have actually probably read it 2 or 3 times, but it's one of my few originals that I have, and then.
Oh, there you go.
Scorpion.
There you
go. This is one of the ones I like for the cover art. And I also have one other first edition Ian Fleming, which is Gilt Edge Bonds. It's not in circulation much. I don't want to say it's rare. It is kind of rare, but you can still find them fairly often. But it's basically just a collection of Casino Royale, From Russia with Love, and Dr. No. So I read these already in the Penguin editions. I've never actually read this one. This is really only for display.
Is that original? But I do have artwork for that edition specifically, or is that a reprint of something else?
Thunderball cover.
I believe it's I don't know if it's an original for this cover. That's a really good question. It is it's still a Richard Chopping though, but it's it's been redesigned by someone else. It says here it's a jacket designed by Leo Manso, but it is an original Richard Chopping, so it's kind of still in the same art.
Awesome. Congratulations on those Pan editions. Those are a lot of fun. I like those.
I think they were $2 each, to be honest.
At that price, you can't.
Yeah, I was gobbling them up, and I bought these years ago. This was probably before I started collecting the Penguins. I didn't get the Penguin editions of these books because I already had the Pan edition. So I got these probably in the late 90s.
Nice. Is there an edition you go to, like, for example, Live and Let Die? Is there one edition that's your go-to Live and Let Die edition? Is it the Penguin or?
It's the Penguin because it's the only one I own. And I don't really, like, if I was going to buy another one, I would probably go after either the reissues that they've done lately of the Folio Society, because I think the covers are just amazingly nice.
The entire artwork.
Yeah, they're really, really nice. Or, I mean, a real true first edition, but I don't know how often those come up.
No, no. Although our friend, mutual friend Jean has, he doesn't have Live and Let Die. I can't. Is it Doctor No and From Russia with Love? Are those the two he
I
has?
I think he has another one too, but
Really?
I
Okay.
think he does. Didn't he have? We need to go back there
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, I
But
know it's
yeah,
been a
I
while.
remember From Russia with Love and Doctor No for sure.
Mm,
Like I've seen
mm,
those, I've touched those, I've held those.
I know.
I've had my fingers in them.
Phrasing.
We grew up
Oops.
Are we
together.
not doing phrasing?
No,
No,
no.
no, no. And that's Matt. What about your history with this book?
I don't remember the edition that I read. I read all of them in order back in 2006 in anticipation of Casino Royale. I started
Mm,
with Casino Royale, then I went through the entire canon in one fell swoop. Um, this one, this one initially I didn't like, but each time I
hmm,
I go back to, I like it. You know what? It's only my first time that I didn't like it. Since then,
hmm.
every time, well, it's my third time. No, actually, no, 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 no. It is my fourth time. Because I read those the box set that I have over there that you guys can't see, and I've listened to the audiobook presentation a few times, so I've lost track. But had been since our recording that I hadn't read the book. I haven't
Hmm.
listened to the other book, so it was nice going back, and to my delight, I enjoyed it even more than I did the last
Very
time.
good. We love it. We love it. Who remind me? I know you said it every time we reviewed the books the first time, but who reads
It's
the?
Tanner. What's his name?
Oh, really? Rory Kinnear.
Rick Kinnear. Yeah, he's
Interesting.
great.
Is it good?
He's
He's
great.
good. Yeah.
Honestly, I'm like, hey, he could visually.
He could be Bond.
Not really, but just the voice and like all the characters that he plays. It's an impressive tour de force for an actor. He plays all the roles when they have dialogue, of course, and he's the narrator at the same time. But he's able to give life and create an image in my
Hmm.
mind. I really enjoy
Hmm.
his performance, and yeah, I had fun reading the book again. How about you?
Me, well, a little bit like yourself. I had never read any of the books until I saw Casino Royale circa 2006. And that prompted me to finally go back to. I mean, if in case listeners don't remember the Mission Begins episode from God knows when, 3+ years ago, I was on a semi hiatus from Bond between Die Another Day and actually I didn't even see Die Another Day in theaters. Okay, I saw it later. That's how much of a hiatus I was on. But Casino Royale was so awesome that I got back into the game. I said I should probably finally read these books. So sort of late 2006, early 2007, a little bit like yourself, Matt. I read them in, as you very nicely put it, one fell swoop. And Live and Let Die. To be perfectly frank, I can't quite recollect what my initial reaction was. I think I didn't quite know what to expect, and I think it took me aback a little bit just for things I'm sure we will get into tonight. I wasn't quite expecting it. I was still new to Fleming. I had only read Casino Royale, and Casino Royale was quite pleasant because it was very easy to follow. Because notwithstanding that the movie adds a whole buffer of an hour at the beginning with a bunch of action, the casino and the aftermath of the casino is basically the film. So it was very easy to read. Whereas Live and Let Die really doesn't have that much to do. Live and Let Die, the book, really doesn't have that much to do with Live and Let Die, the film, which I knew very well. So I would say Live and Let Die was the first time I was getting this version of James Bond that I really was not familiar with at all, just because the movie and the book are so different. But in the intervening years, I do, it does keep on growing on me. I would say this reading, the reading I did earlier this week and last weekend, was the most interesting. Not because we were going to do a podcast, but I hadn't read it since our first review of it, and so much has happened since then in the world. So much has happened that, yeah, reading it this week, it's still a damn fine adventure. As an adventure story, it's freaking awesome. And then there are these little turns where you're like, this would never pass muster today. Never. Especially today. This guy
Cancel
would
Fleming.
he would be crucified.
Oh my god!
Oh my God.
If you want to talk about cancel culture, this is the book that Ian Fleming would get absolutely canceled. And there was an article that came out a few months ago about millennials' reaction to the '60s Bond movies. They obviously have not read this book, or I'm trying to think of another book that might be worse than this, and Fleming's portrayal of a certain person or a certain race, or or of women that would have had this backlash. But I mean, Live and Let Die, and I don't want to say right out that Ian Fleming is racist, because I don't necessarily believe that he is, or was, I should say. What I do believe is that he doesn't really care in the way that he describes anyone, because I've seen it. After reading Thrilling Cities, I came to the same conclusion. He just doesn't like anybody. He'll find the faults, and he'll describe a certain person from a certain country in a certain way by the way they look, and just these overdeveloped stereotypes of that person. So yes, it's going to be perceived as super racist, because chapter 5, we can't even say the name of chapter 5.
We're gonna get.
We will be canceled.
Yeah.
we will be canceled right away. But I can't even imagine what the audiobook must be like, and having Rory Kinnear, who is the straight-faced actor of how does, like, I don't really listen to audiobooks all that much, but I can't imagine listening to this as an audiobook and not cringing at the same time as Rory Kinnear is cringing when he reads that part where they're in the conversation between the young black man and his girlfriend.
Gracious, yeah.
You know what? I'm trying to follow along and read it, and in my head try and say, like, try and word this out, what he's trying to say, and I'm like, people don't talk like this. Maybe maybe in the 50s they did, but people don't, like.
Yeah, but they're clearly stereotypical, poorly educated, lower class.
But I mean, the whole basis of Mr. Big's operation is that all his employees are working class, lower class people, and working class and lower class jobs. Like, none of them are professionals. They're all, they're porters, or they're bellboys, or they're, working on the trains, or etc.
Those are the ones that have jobs. The crooks that they're like the mobster, the gangsters are like these morons that can barely put a sentence together. It's all slang. But you know what? To his credit, he gives them life that you'd be surprised. He gives them spark. They sound. He especially sounds like a pure psychopath. The way he's performing, just too much. He gets off, and I had a reading this time, and I'm not entirely certain that there's a little bit of c'est le colonisateur, the colonizer that's visiting his former colonies, and just like, oh, this changed. But also it's about superstition, and the entire villain of Mr. Big uses fear and superstition as power. It's part of his sort of his his superpower is like, people are afraid of me, and that's when he gets in trouble, is when Bond is able to sort of get away multiple times. People are like, yeah, you're not that powerful, you're not that dangerous. And Bond eventually, like the beginning of the book, he's reading the book and he's really getting into it, and Bond sort of spooks him. But throughout the book, and it's something that happens also in Doctor No when they have a sort of myths about that dragon. So I'm like, there's something in there. Maybe Bond is supposed to represent modernity, and so the villains are sort of trying to. They're communists most of the time, so that's also in there. And also, I mean, to Fleming, there was so much fear of communists that they kind of combined black power and communism in the 50s. Since people had this impression, oh, well, we can't,
Right.
but it's in there. Like, I think I picked up on something that I hadn't the first time. I was interesting.
But it's very light, though, the communist Smersh connection. I mean, it's mentioned, and it's like barely mentioned that he's seen Russian spies and he's been to Russia. It's not as central as, you know, Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, where the whole thing was, you know, he was a communist in France, running the communist funds, and you know, the Smersh was after him and everything. We kind of, in this book, I feel, lose that connection, and it was kind of like, I'm just going to carry on kind of the little bit of theme from the first book to kind of tie in. The villains are all going to maybe be on the side of the Russians. I didn't feel as if the Russian connection was as heavy in Live and Let Die as it was in other novels. And I kind of feel like maybe that would be like a weak connection to have black gangsters working for the Russians. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, it's kind of as ridiculous as seeing Forrest Whitaker as a samurai in Ghost Dog. If you're familiar with that movie, Matt, I know you are. It's kind of that ridiculous that Forrest Whitaker in the movie Ghost Dog believes that he's a samurai and he's working for the New York mafia. To have Mr. Big, who is a black, obviously Haitian or of African descent, to be using voodoo, but probably Haitian if he's in New York. Just because of, you know, the connection, and the connection to voodoo, it's obvious that, you know, that might not necessarily go with Russian communism and Smersh as we know it, and there's kind of that weak, in my opinion, connection between the two.
There might be perhaps Fleming felt obligated, given how he concludes Casino Royale, and the vim and verve with which Bond sort of decides that he's going to smash Smersh. These are obviously the final lines, final paragraphs of Casino Royale. Maybe Fleming felt obligated to follow up on that. Why did he choose to follow up on that in a movie that features Mr. Big, who's also Baron Samedi and uses quotation marks voodoo to keep his people in check? I don't know. Why did he? Why is that the link he wants to? Perhaps you could argue that, well, because it's unexpected, you wouldn't think Smersh would use that. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching. It'd be interesting to try to find that out. Maybe.
If I remember, his backstory is that during the war, he was working for the Allied. At one point, he went to Russia, then he went back to America, and then he built his empire with probably Russian funds. And now he's just, you know, he's mostly a gangster. I guess they call him once in a while and say, "Oh, do this thing or get that thing," but most of the time I feel like he's like Max Zorin to bring back to the films, but he's like a Max Zorin that's, I work with the KGB, but 90% of the time I'm going to work for myself.
Interesting. I didn't create that link. That's interesting.
But I mean, the films, they ditch the whole Russian thing altogether, don't they? I mean, they make him just a black gangster, and I feel they could have done the same thing in the book. I mean, if you did a quick re-edit of the book and cut out all references to Smersh, the book still stands as its own. It doesn't change the course of the story, in my opinion. It's still, if it's just a black gangster and you're fighting against a black gangster because he's going after Captain Morgan's gold, and technically that money belongs to the British Treasury, then you're kind of still going along the exact same plot, and you're moving the same plot along. The fact that Russia is involved in one way or another doesn't change anything. I think the only thing that would have changed the tone of the book is if they had a Russian agent attack Bond at one point, and that would have kind of solidified that, you know, Smersh is involved in this. But
It's a good
Yeah.
point. It's a good point. I have to admit, the Smirch angle is, it's there, but it's
It's
not.
almost like you could have replaced, if we're going to do like a fan fiction edit, you could almost, if I were to venture with a no clarification, actually, no, this wouldn't be a no clarification. This would be like a bastardization. But, if you reworked the book, it could be Spectre. Doesn't really matter. Mr. Big
It
could be Nation
doesn't.
of Spectre.
It doesn't. And if you were going to remake it as a movie, like people have kind of been, clamoring for Daniel Craig to do Live and Let Die, you could have made it Quantum. It could have. It doesn't have to have
Quantum's dead.
necessarily
Oh,
a straight connection. No, but I mean, if they had done this before Spectre, if they had
I
done
think
this,
you can say that of
after.
all the novels that feature Smirch there. When they did the movies, they just
Right, but I mean, Spectre
Spectre
was created
as a
by,
replacement.
as a replacement, and it worked very well. And Fleming thought that it was going to take off and be wonderful, and then he got himself into hot water legally, et cetera, et cetera. That's another review for another day. But they could have just left it as is. The Baron Samedi voodoo angle, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because I know that there's a lot of people who are spiritual in their own different way. If they had done the same kind of book but in like the deep south in Alabama, and it had been a Baptist preacher with snakes and stuff, I mean, you would have gotten the same point across, regardless of the character and the backstory. I think that the voodoo thing worked as a great kind of plot device, and the Baron Samedi idol kind of works as keeping people in check and gives them a reason to stay in check. It's a cult like any other cult.
I actually really like Baron Samedi in this. Well, Mr. Big, Bonaparte Ignace Gallia. In this reading, I was amused by, because when you first meet him, he's sort of bored. He's a bored villain that is sort of the master of his own domain. He's reached the pinnacle. He can't go more on top, and he needs Spawn. And he's toying with him. He's just like, I'm just gonna break your finger. I'm gonna mess up your friend. Now you really got on my nerves. I'm gonna shred you alive. I'm gonna create an entertaining way of killing you. It's a cliche from the movies, but that's where it starts, like the toying of Bond.
And we have our second lead villain, that like doesn't want to go through these prolonged torture. He thinks they're pointless. Just go directly to the point. He says, "What's the finger you use least?" And Bond's like, "WTF?" That was in
cracked.
Moment. The point about the voodoo is an interesting one. On the one hand, it and this is one of the things that made my most recent reading quite an interesting one that made me pause for reflection. The presence of the voodoo in the book, real or unreal, makes Mr. Big's minions occasionally seem quite not duplicitous isn't the word I'm looking for, naive, or what's that word, the adjective to describe someone that will very easily believe in something you tell them. Naive, yes, but I think there's another word for it. Gullible.
Yeah.
It does, and they seem so gullible that they come off as a little bit silly, a little bit dumb. Although one of you two alluded to the fact that they're not particularly educated.
Also, they come off as really, like, the worst one is, I feel, they come off as sadist. They've been sort of marginalized because of their race. Yeah, they're victims of racism, but they also are, in a way, because they often they're threatening Bond and calling all kinds of name also. So it's back and forth to the you're black, you're white, blah blah blah. But he just enjoys creating pain. He's a sadist, and a lot of them have traits that are just they're psychopaths. They've been the worst ones are come off completely batshit crazy. and some of them are just I'm trying to feed my family. The guy on the train, for example, he's like, I have a
Yeah.
job.
I have a job. I'm doing my job. I don't want any trouble.
Mm.
I just want to get on with my life, and I'm gonna give you the heads up, but don't bother me about it anymore. He ends up dead, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
he did his best to not get involved. He
Hmm.
got involved. No, but if you're going from one occult extremist to another, or if he's Charles Manson, for example, if he had infiltrated them, one cult to another, it is all about one leader who has one religious or spiritual vision that convinces all the rest of his
Yeah,
vision, and they blindly will follow.
Mm.
And you see this name a cult, and that's how it works. You have one leader who tells everyone what to do. He creates this a specter of fear,
Ooh.
and he controls them through that fear. They go to like Southern Baptist, where they have there's certain churches that have got snake charmers and stuff like that, and the people will believe what you tell them if you're convincing enough, and you take people who are already desperate and already kind of, I don't want to say uneducated, but people who are already weak and
desperate.
are just looking desperate and are just looking for
You
something
create
to hang
enough
on to.
desperation and misery, and good people will do bad things.
Right.
A support network, so to speak.
Yeah.
And with
You
the
know,
novel, as much as with the movie, like the movie Live and Let Die, the movie, the book kind of, it's blacks in America at the time were very suppressed and oppressed, and there was the civil rights movement and all that would come later and things like that, and there was segregation, and they lived through all that. And Mr. Big in the book kind of takes advantage of that. He bands his brothers together, but at the same time he manipulates them to the point where you're just going to work for me, and I'm going to get rich off your back because I've got the money, but you're going to distribute and make this money back for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the movie, it's kind of like, well, let's just take the stereotype of the blaxploitation films that are already out in the 70s and just use it to the Bond advantage and make a blaxploitation film, but with James Bond.
That's why it's one of the best. No, but yeah, it's oh no, Matt, I think you got something on your mind.
I actually, when I was reading the book, I was not reminded. Mr. Big didn't remind me of the film adaptation. I was thinking of actually, what it remind me of when using sort of superstition, cloaking oneself under the cloth of a cult or a dark, shadowy figure. Candyman. Have you seen the original
Right.
Candyman? Because originally when they the real Candyman is just a crook that beats up on Michael Madsen's sister, and he just cloaked himself in the guise of Candyman because there was already a myth of Candyman. That's what Mr. Big. Oh, I look like the description of Baron Sandy. Thereby, I'll make myself look and be respected, and it's all tricks and mirrors to appear immortal and flawless and perfect, and that's what he does until he meets Bond.
Very
James
true.
Bond.
Ooh, very well done. It was a good Connery. What I wish the book had done a little bit more efficiently, or had in a more pronounced fashion. I think Matt, earlier you were specifying that Mr. Big has a lot of people under his thumb, thanks in large part to voodoo, and through his encounters with James Bond, that infallibility, you start to see the fissures, the cracks. And it is mentioned fleetingly by Mr. Big himself, I believe, on the Ile of Surprise, when he has Bond captive. People are starting to question my powers because of you. I wish we had seen that a little bit. I wish we had met a character other than Solitaire, who's the obvious one. But you sort of get the feeling from the second that she tightens her cleavage, that's like, okay, she's the Bond girl. She'll be on Bond's side. I wish we had met a character who was more staunchly under Mr. Big's thumb, who would have said, wait a second, he's not Baron Samedi? Like, I think that would have been cool. I was a little bit disappointed that the book
Something that
didn't
would have
do that.
worked well in a movie. You said you
Yeah.
just see the followers sort of move away from him, and he's he's losing his mind, and they all go their separate ways, and just that ends up in a fist fight between him and Bond. That would have been interesting.
But at the same time, is Solitaire, I feel that Solitaire doesn't really like not believe Mr. Big's powers as much as she sees Bond as finally someone who can get me out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one else would have been willing to maybe do that, because no one else has had, the guts to go against Mr. Big, but Bond and Leiter kind of have the balls to do it. I don't think my comprehension of Solitaire is not as much as I don't believe in Mr. Big anymore. She was kind of, captive under him, and he was captive of her too, because he believed that she could, really read the cards and really, predict the future, and she had powers too, or, he wanted to believe that. I think she was just finally said, I've got a way out. This guy will get me out of here. No one else has been able to present this opportunity. She's just jumping at it. Not that I don't really get the impression that she ever felt that she was under Mr. Big's power, but I think that's more the fault of Fleming for not developing her backstory enough. We kind of just get enough of it to say that she's an orphan or whatever, and she grew up in Haiti and she's white, which is explain that away. But there's not the follow-up of what her actual her backstory of how she met Mr. Big and how that relationship developed, and does she love him, does she really believe in him, or is she just his captive?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Solitaire. I'm glad you brought that. I brought up a bit of a rinky-dink point, and you sort of solidified your own. Let's talk about Solitaire a little bit. What do we think of her? What's Simone Latrelle? I'm trying to remember her actual name. Simone Latrelle. Does she leave much of an impact in this book? Does she?
She's. Yeah, maybe I'm thinking about Vesper. You know what?
That amorphous blob.
Yeah, but she climbed up. She climbed up. She's I don't. She's not as amorphous as I initially thought. I was when I listened to other people.
We were younger. We were naive.
You know what? I'm not in love with my own opinion that much that I'm not willing to listen to other people and actually rethink my opinion and change. I'm not that rigid when it comes to my personal opinion.
You're a beautiful human being.
Thank you. What I like is that she's always looking for opportunities, because she was in sort of a brothel in AV, from what I understood, like reading, using her gift. And is she really? Does she really have that gift of telepathy or being able to see the future? Because at one point, Bond asks her what she did when Mr. Big put people in front of her and asks her to judge them or tell him if they were saying the truth, and she basically tells them, well, if they look like nice people, I said that they were okay. If they look like crooks or looked at me funny, you know what? If I'm not feeling it, he's lying or whatever. I'm like, okay, so you don't have powers. You just.
I know.
But I mean, she didn't have powers, but neither did Mr. Big. So I think that the bit of character development that we're missing is, does Mr. Big really believe she has powers, or is he keeping it around as a plaything, or is she just there for the illusion because she has the backstory of perhaps having powers, and it continues to hold truth through his followers that she has power, she's with me, I'm Baron Samedi, she's Solitaire, this is how it works, she predicts the future, I'm the zombie of whatever.
It makes them codependent. You picked up on something, because Mr. Big tries to use the guise of Baron Samedi to make himself look more powerful, and she uses her telepathy to make herself more useful than she actually is. They're both sort of mirror images in a way, which I don't know if you meant to to explain it
well,
this way, but I find that very interesting.
but they are, because Mr. Big has his power over his followers, and she is kind of an accessory to that power, but she's
She
not
has power over him, actually.
exactly. But she's got a pale complexion. She's the contrast of her dark hair to her pale complexion. Which doesn't make sense, because I mean, she grew up in Haiti. How can she have that pale of a complexion? She should be partially tanned through all
That
those years of
that depends. Some
of
people just can't keep a tan. Some people are.
But
Well,
anyway,
I mean, we live in Quebec. When have we seen the sun?
I haven't seen the sun in forever. But um, I think that the portrayal of Solitaire is done a little bit better in the movie than it is in the book, because
Interesting.
I feel that we kind of feel her we feel her as being more naive and a little bit more innocent in the movie than she comes across in the book. In the book, it does come across that she's naive and maybe a little dumb, but she kind of like
Oh, I thought
she still has like a little bit of a her character development isn't as deep in the book, so you kind of don't get that sense of her, but they do her more justice in the movie. She's got a little bit more, I feel, in the movie.
No,
that
but I'm listening to you. It's just I didn't.
better.
We completely, it's all right. It's a safe space. I just don't judge my reaction. I'm just that's now I.
Hey, you
pictured
judged me for 3 letters before, so let's.
What?
But anyway, no, I just
don't
feel
remember
that the character. I feel that the character development in the book for Solitaire isn't as good as the character development was in the movie, because Jane Seymour did such a good job in kind of portraying her as this kind of, how can I say this? She was kind of a sheltered person that she comes across in the movie as being super sheltered and naive and
Kept woman.
a kept woman kind of. Yeah, exactly. That comes across. But in the book, it doesn't. In the book, it's just like kind of very very nonchalant, kind of like just the way that she is. She's kind of like, yeah, sometimes I call him like this, sometimes I call him like that. I'm trying to get away from him because he's controlling, but we kind of don't feel like her life is in danger at any point, or like that she just wants to get away from him. We don't feel like there's any like
she doesn't want to be married to him, and you know what? I'm not gonna say what would have happened
Live
on
happily
our
ever after.
wedding night, but
But we don't get that in that sense of impeding doom. We don't get that
True.
sense of he's gonna kill me, he's dangerous, he's gonna rape me, he's gonna beat me. We don't get that. We just kind of get that like he's bad, I want to get away. There's no sense of urgency.
Yeah, that's the fair assessment.
And I think further to that point, I know I started this episode by saying I do enjoy the book. I swear to God, guys and listeners, I do like this book. But further to your point, Emery, you were comparing the book with the film in relation to the character of Solitaire. I think something that, it's not just because I love the movie so much, but more seriously, something the movie does quite well, a little bit, are scenes exclusively with Mr. Big and Solitaire, conversations between those two characters, and we get, as the viewer, we get the sense that yes, she really is a kept woman, because this Mr. Big guy, or Kananga really in the movie, but this Mr. Big guy is quite a character vis-a-vis Solitaire, and we never get that conversation or any conversation really between Mr. Big and Solitaire in the book. He does whip her, to be fair. He does whip her, the one lashing when he gets the sensation that when Bond is attached that she's cleavage, you know what I'm saying? And he's like, what the hell? And the phone call the next morning, I think that phone call to Bond is probably our one little scene that's suggesting that Solitaire is not too comfortable in Mr. Big's clutches. But I agree that the movie does, funnily enough, for a movie that's like also like really funny and zany, the movie actually does do that better. This dark and really skin-crawling relation between Kananga in the movie and Solitaire, and you don't. The book
There's
does
more
miss that.
there's more tension because of she's a kept woman. He has her under his thumb completely. Well, in the book, which I tend to appreciate, she's the one that escapes. In the movie, she's saved by Bond, and I loved that she.
Yeah.
In the novel, she calls him, says, I need out of here, and she follows him in the train. She makes a choice. Well, Jean Seymour, she's lovely and amazing, and I love her, but she's just being dragged along throughout that movie as a child. She looks like a kid that Roger Moore's like, come on, girl, we're gonna miss
But that
the
seems
bus.
like a more honest way that Solitaire should have been from the novel. Like that's kind of like the backstory. The way that she's portrayed in the film seems like a more appropriate backstory that could have been in the novel. In the novel, I mean, they just didn't. I feel like they just didn't do enough with her. They could have used her kind of sideline a bit more to develop her, and he does that later on with Hildebrandt Rarity, where what's his name, the villain's wife, who's on the boat, who gets beaten
Crest.
by the Crest, who gets beaten by the stingray tail. There's a whole build up to that. We get the kind of sense that she's a kept woman, but she's also a beaten woman. She's there's kind of
I see your
there's
point.
a history of violence, and there's a history of abuse, and there's a reason for her to want to get away from this man. Whereas in this book, it's just like, I'm kind of done. I just want to get out of here. He's he's a bad guy. I just I'm done.
I agree that
Boring.
there's not like you said, an impending doom, but I don't want to talk about Solitaire forever. There's one thing I want to talk about, and I want to bring it up to the group.
Hit me.
It's the prose in this novel, the descriptions, and I don't have my book close enough, so I can't read from my book. So you guys will have to do it for me. I didn't think about doing a book review without my book in my hands. But the description, the phrasing, and sort of flourish that Fleming used to describe situations, or especially everything that's underwater, is so beautifully and elegantly phrased, described, and he creates a picture in your mind, and it's like you're there. But that happens throughout the book. But especially that part is my favorite part. There's only one thing that is a little bit ridiculous, and I think Emery and I were going to do an entire show on just that part eventually.
Right. You mean the 12 meals that he eats? No, okay. You mean the octopus? Yes.
Yes, I mean the octopus.
No,
I messaged you. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's. And I googled it quickly, but it's a very non-frequent thing, and they need to be huge to be of any threat to a man.
Well, that and in Octopussy, it's the kind of the same thing, because we've what we're referencing is going to be discussed in a later podcast, but the same situation that happens in Live and Let Die does happen again in Octopussy, where forgetting his name too now, and I just recently read this book, but the antagonist in the book goes out every day into the water, and he snorkels, and there's this one octopus that he's trying to befriend, and the way the aggressive behavior of this octopus, you would think that the thing is massive, but in reality octopuses aren't really that big. I mean, go to any supermarket at the seafood counter and just look at an octopus tentacle, and you're looking at something maybe at most 16 inches long and not very threatening. It's not something that's going to kill a man. Is it going to bother you? Probably.
Yeah, they're cowards. I mean, that's why they're sprouting ink. It's their camouflage to escape.
Right. They're not going to attack a human. It's not a shark or a piranha or anything else. It's it's not a predatory animal that's going to go after something as large as a human.
Yeah.
It's funny that you guys bring up the octopus, and I can't wait to listen to that that episode. But a few months ago, late 2020, you and me, Matt, we reviewed the Dynamite comics
Yes.
graphic novel adaptation. And if I don't know if you recall that sequence, they really they supersized that octopus. Like it's a
They
real
have
bad
to.
mofo.
I don't
Yeah, I was
remember,
thinking
but
about that. So because when I read this passage, I did think about that comic. I was like, wait a minute. Did they?
honestly, it makes me curious. I have to see how big. Maybe it's the Caribbeans have these because of the conditions of the sea and the marine life have these huge octopus. That is the Caribbean. Are the Caribbeans known for octopus attacks? I don't think so.
Well, he writes about him in 2 different books, and he did live in the Caribbean for all that time. So
I think he would know.
Yeah, but
maybe
Fleming embellish things and kind of bullshit is a way. He
but he
talks
doesn't in
about
Doctor
food and
No too.
Fake it till you make it.
but
He
it's
doesn't in Doctor No as well, doesn't he? Like, isn't the whole kind of whole ending of Doctor No, the climax? They're tied down and going to be eaten by crabs, and there's a giant octopus that's going to eat them too. I mean, that's I've seen.
You've
like,
described
I've seen,
that ending.
That's what it is. They tie them down.
It
And
is.
they're going to be eaten by crabs, which also, like, I've been to Cuba and I've seen crabs there, and I've never been less scared of an animal in my life than when I saw that crab, because it's so not threatening. The crab just is walking along the beach and it's just minding his own damn business. I can't foresee these thousands of crabs eating. So, maybe Fleming has seen something that we haven't seen. Maybe Jamaican crabs are just crazy. He would know. He spent all that time down there, gallivanting around. Maybe Jamaican crabs is something completely different for him. But yeah, he does embellish that whole. Maybe not with the barracudas, because I do know that barracudas are quite nasty. Having seen them in aquariums and stuff like that, they don't look like they're friendly animals, and I've heard histories of barracudas being quite nasty. That part I'll believe. It's again the octopuses that are kind of crazy in Fleming's world.
Well, that's actually fair. That part of the journey that Bond does from the coast of Jamaica to the Ile de la Surprise, that end part, very believable.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fleming did that kind of work during the war too. I mean, he was the whole part with the limpet mine. That's stuff that he was an actual expert in. This is stuff that he actually would do. He's done this before, the underwater stuff. Maybe not actively during the war, but
probably
he was
in Ontario, right?
Yeah, well, no, I don't know if he. No, see, in Lake Ontario, he didn't do any of that stuff. Like the whole Camp X stuff, he only did the. There's no evidence that they tried to do any of that underwater stuff in Lake Ontario.
Really? I thought they did. That was the entire point of putting the training center right next to the lake. It's just I don't want to go into the segue, but
that's what I thought as well. But when I spoke with Lynn Phillip Hodgson, who is the historian that runs the Camp X website right now, he confirmed to me that Lake Ontario was not picked to depict a certain landscape at all. It was basically picked because that's where they had room. And nothing else. It was because the land was available and they can get a transmitter there and hide it in plain sight, and they had no other issues. It was just out of convenience, because I had thought too that they must have used it as, because they were training a lot of agents that were from Yugoslavia and from the Balkans in that area. So I was like, oh well, they were using it as a backdrop for the Balkans. It's like no, it was just because that's where they had a camp. It was for no other reason.
I love that about you, Emery. You just need to bring up something from World War II, Camp X, and you start rolling. It's amazing.
That's from the WAS interview with Camp X historian Lynn Phillip Hodgson that I completely botched the interview audio on that may eventually come out as text, but for right now, unfortunately, that whole conversation has been lost. But yeah, I mean, Fleming has been documented as being kind of not necessarily an expert, but kind of well versed in those underwater tactics of using limpet mines. So that whole scene was kind of like, well, now I get to talk about what I like to do.
Yeah, blow shit up. Or
Yeah.
send people to blow shit up. I don't mean, but I do very much going back to your original point, Matt, about the pros, and in
Yes.
particular that passage where Bond scuba dives, really from where they're in Beau Desert.
Yes,
Which
they
is a
are
great name.
in.
And
They're near the estate of what's his name?
Coward? No, Coward?
Yeah, Noel Coward. That's actually, if I remember correctly, that's, and I showed you pictures. If you Google map it, you see the Ile de la Surprise, the inspiration for it. It's
coral.
clearly that. And whenever
something.
we're able to go to Jamaica, if we all go together, I'm dragging your asses over there, and we're going to L'Île de la Surprise for reals, man. For reals.
I'm not sure much dragging will be necessary.
Okay, it won't be necessary, but get me enough red stripe and I'll get into scuba gear and get down there with you.
Oh shit, can you imagine if we do that? If we ever actually do those scuba lessons, if we scuba, that'd be something.
Oh my god, imagine.
That would be
I think I oh my god.
That would be the pinnacle of why are you getting scuba lessons? So I can go to Ile de la Surprise.
Underwater.
Is that in Saguenay? No, that's in Jamaica.
You wish it was in Saguenay, brother. But it's a marvelous passage, and there are many passages in this book where the descriptions are very floral. The pain that Bond suffers, and we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past on previous episodes. But Fleming really likes his animal analogies. People looking like animals, behaving like animals, sounding like animals, snarling like animals. Yes. He loves doing that. But I agree that this passage, which lasts pretty much a whole chapter and then some, where Bond is scuba diving towards Ile de la Surprise, and the way he describes the underwater world, le monde du silence, the way he describes that is so. It really is quite magical, and it feels like Fleming, at his peak as a writer, as a descriptor, as someone that sets tone and describes a world. And I think I feel I could tell that. I mean, Emery, you were saying, I get to talk about Fleming thinking I get to talk about something I know, putting the limpet mine. I would add that. I would take that argument and also add it to, now I get to write something I love, scuba diving and describing what I found underwater. I feel that, and that's not to say that the rest of the book doesn't have those beautiful descriptions, but I just feel it's like the Baccarat table in Casino Royale. How do you make that interesting in the book? Read those chapters in by Fleming.
Yeah.
How do you make the underwater world sound amazing? Read this chapter in Live and Let Die. There's never a dull moment in the way Fleming writes. I still think you can tell, he really enjoys writing about that. He's getting off right now,
And to that point, how do you make golf interesting? Watch 30 minutes of golf on TV. And then watch the golf scene from Goldfinger and read the golf scene from Goldfinger, and it's two different worlds, because he'll actually go into description and you feel like you're there and you feel more of a part of it. If you're just watching, Tiger Woods on TV, you're kind of like, he can hit a ball pretty good, I guess. We actually get into, the reasons why they're playing, the kind of the specifics of the game. In the Baccarat game of Casino Royale, you can describe Baccarat. I mean, the guys from Trey Bond did a very good job of it in Casino Royale, the Casino Royale fan commentary we did. They did a very great description. It's very well produced, drunk banter about Baccarat, but you don't get that same excitement, and I think that's kind of a commentary on how you can take something so, in French we'd say banal, something so simple and something so mundane, and make it exciting with its description and kind of get into the anticipation of everything. And this is the same thing as he does with the underwater scenes and all that. It's the anticipation of the stuff that he's doing, and how he can describe it in words that doesn't necessarily translate visually well, because some of the underwater scenes that we see in the movies kind of are, I don't want to say dull, but they're not as exciting as they are in the books.
No, they're not.
Thunderball comes to mind as being kind of like there's 10 minutes of underwater silence. Whereas in this book, the kind of the way he describes, and every time he describes anything underwater, and scuba diving or snorkeling or whatever, we kind of really get this hyper realistic description of what's going on, which is amazing because this is stuff that we can't necessarily live in our everyday lives, and we can kind of escape for 10 minutes into a world that we don't know, and get a nice understanding of it.
Oh, absolutely. And he definitely enjoys writing about Jamaica, just little moments where, pre scuba diving mission, Bond he smells corals cooking, and it's dusk, but you can start seeing the stars in the sky, but there's still some orange on the horizon. And he's underneath the palm trees, and he's sitting on the sand. I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm there with him. It's quite remarkable. He's a genius. He's a genius.
Like if Casino Royale was kind of his romancing of the war years, Live and Let Die was more romancing of what his after war years were like when he moved to GoldenEye and his appreciation of other countries. But it's also kind of, this narrative of, let's go from New York by train all the way down to Florida, and kind of explore. And this will be another podcast as well, but he does explore American cuisine somewhat differently, throughout the American eastern seaboard, on his way to Jamaica. Jamaican cuisine is a little bit different, and I actually had to look up some of the stuff because he describes it the 1950s as one thing, and he mentions pawpaw a couple of times, and we know that as papaya now, but I guess back in the 50s it was known as pawpaw. And there's a whole, everything he eats. I mean, this is like really the food Bible of Fleming.
There's a lot of food in this book. There's a lot of food in this book.
Nobody picked up the foods of Bond as a Instagram or a podcast or
except that piece of shit book, Bon Appetit, Mr.
There's License to Cook by Edward Biddulph, and that's actually a podcast that's been on this show. So
he's not talking about that. He's talking
there's been some other stuff, but
a French book that they have good ideas. It's just they wrote this massive break that's not that great to read. Speaking of description of moments that stay in with you, the moment where Bond finds Leiter's body mangled, covered in bandages, and he's sort of unwrapping, and he sees the hair with the roots still black and like covered in blood, and he oh god, it's just disgusting and scary. Yeah, it's one that entire segment from him discovering Leiter's body, and even the sort of the call they gets to get to the hospital, to get him away from the house so that they can drop his body over here. To him going back and fighting the what do you call him, the robber,
yeah.
And fighting him. The way he describes sort of the noise that a shark's mouth makes.
Yes.
I'm like, I need, I haven't done it, but I need to find videos of shark just to hear what's that noise that he makes, because they don't have vocal cords. They don't roar from the when they jump from the sea, just like in Jaws 4. That's not the real thing.
Does a shark roar in Jaws 4?
Yeah, there's a shark that roars in Jaws, The Revenge.
I gotta watch that movie now.
Yeah, I probably whoever edits this, put a clip of it.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
this is kind of a good like line of commenting because we haven't talked about Felix Leiter's involvement in this book at all. And Felix Leiter, this is a buddy cop book. Like, you know, this is
Lethal Weapon.
This is yeah, exactly. This is a team up. This is like, you know,
Rush Hour.
They're going out drinking. Let's go get drunk. Let's go get food. Let's go out on the town. Let's go have a night of it. That goes horribly wrong by the end when they get to Florida. But it's kind of like really buddy cop-ish that, you know, he's not necessarily a minor character, but he kind of appears in Casino Royale very briefly. And
it's almost a co-lead for a long period of the book. He's I don't remember how many chapters he appears on, but he looms big in this book.
From the very beginning to about halfway through the book, when they kind of split ways and he's with Solitaire, they don't really meet up again until they get back to Florida, and then it's kind of, you know, they're buddy copping again, like they're teaming up again before he gets, you know, eaten. But it's the best book to feature Felix Leiter in, and they do not do it justice in the movies until much later. Like License to Kill is the only time where they kind of really, and it's the best Felix Leiter appearance in the films, I feel. But they're just taking it from this book, the second book.
Even the Leiter that we meet in Doctor No, it has nothing to do with. He's not in the book in Doctor No at all. So he's more a graft from, like, they took him from Live and Let Die and just like, let's shove it in there. And then they take half the story and then put it into License to Kill, because I kind of like, I'm reading the book and I'm reading the part with the sharks and all that. I'm like, this wasn't in that movie. This was why am I getting a feeling this was a Dalton? And then it's like, well, because they mixed them up. And I love Felix Leiter. I think he's a great addition to the series, and they haven't really had a chance to do him a great deal of justice in the movies, except for a few appearances. I watched Diamonds Are Forever the other day, and it's like, why is he in this movie? Like, why is this even mentioned? They could have just favorite one.
There's a podcast coming up on that one too. But it's, you know, he's not a great Felix Leiter, and even, you know, my favorite Felix Leiter and my favorite appearance is License to Kill, because of this book. It's the faithful recreation of Felix Leiter's best book and best appearance in the novels in film was that, but it's based on this book. This was his best appearance.
Felix is. I'm glad you also brought up his very limited role in Casino Royale. You know, some people are called third wheels. He's almost a fourth wheel in Casino Royale, and in fact,
that's already as a third wheel kind of thing. And this is like kind of like, well, he's there too. Kind of another, like, this is the American portion of it, because we kind of got to slip that in there because they're involved too.
Yeah, and since I'm trying to remember, how is it that Leiter is involved? Because he's CIA, he's not FBI. It's explained. It's a little convoluted, but for some reason, CIA, Felix Leiter as a CIA agent is working on home soil. Anyways, but no, it is really, really fun to have him along, and it's really an expansion of that character from Casino Royale, and he's so lovable. He's very quick-witted. I love the fact, I cannot get enough of that section. This is after their horrible encounter with Mr. Big and his minions, and they reconvene later on the next day, I think it is. And Felix is basically saying, well, you know, one of them wasn't that bad. We started shooting the shit about jazz, and I'm like, what the hell is going on?
You smooth talked your way out of a beating, and I got a broken effing hand.
It's you know, Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan in he's not Shanghai Noon. Shanghai Noon, yeah.
Yeah,
one of those are just gonna, I'm just gonna charm my way out, and the other is like fighting.
And you mentioned Owen Wilson, but Owen Wilson is kind of like, you know, the physical description of Felix Leiter from the books. You know, the mop of blonde hair, kind of Texan accent. You know, kind of
very
that or Matthew McConaughey. You know,
yes. The laid back attitude and sort of like, very, very relaxed. That that you can't help but love that character. He's so likable. He's just charming, easygoing, and Bond's sort of, I'm grumpy. Oh, didn't make coffee the way I like it. Thereby there.
So
Jerks.
probably not in those diners. No, they probably didn't make the coffee the way he likes it.
Mm.
Bond does loosen up a little bit when I believe it is when they're in the car from Ouroboros, their first meeting, where the robber shoots the pelican, and they're driving back. And I think there's a paragraph of the book where Fleming basically says, "Yeah, they're just like teasing each other on the way back to the cabin." So they're the little hints that when Bond or when Felix is in Bond's presence, that Bond does slacken his attitude slackens a little bit, which is nice to know. I think that says not just a lot about Bond. I think that says a lot about Felix later, just how he's such a cool guy that he can even make James Bond chuckle a little bit and
Yeah.
wow, you think that? Well, no. I think that does say a lot about Felix later.
It's also a way to motivate Bond later on. But I was thinking earlier, like I laughed to myself, and I said to myself, in Casino Royale, his appearance is almost like weird comparison, but Hawkeye in the first Thor movie, he's just there for a quick moment, and he's sort of a bigger character later. But I love when they're in New York and he's just talking about his background, that he used to write for a newspaper. That you find out so much information. He's very laid back, cool cat that you just like, you can't help but just smile when he's around. It's tragic.
It's great for character development for his character. It's really and the point you were making about him in the car and the teasing thing, I mean, that kind of humanizes both of them, and we never get that kind of portrayal on film either between the two. We never kind of get that kind of like humanization of Bond, where Fleming kind of weakens Bond at several points in the novels, and humanizes him and kind of gives into defeat and things like that. They never really do that in the films, where he's kind of at his wit's end and he's kind of giving up, maybe briefly in Casino Royale, but they kind of make him this hard ass the whole rest of the time. I would love to see a scene where Bond and Felix Leiter are just getting shit faced, just
well, maybe No Time to Die. They're in a bar.
Not
or a club
as
or something,
but I'm not convinced.
And sort of, when they have, in Doctor, when they're drinking at Pussfella's bar and they see the photographer, they look relaxed. They don't show Bond just, relax, enjoying himself. And I think the entire community mentions that in some way, shape, or way in their platforms. But it's really evident. Going back to Fleming, he's not Daniel Craig as James Bond, I love him, but I'm pretty sure if you want to make diamonds, he's so tense and crispy. You just need to put a piece of charcoal between his butt cheeks, and you're gonna get a diamond. He's so.
But and see, that's kind of one of the characterizations of Bond in film that doesn't translate as well from the books, because in the books, what's the book After Diamonds Are Forever, where Tiffany Case is still hanging around and he's kind of like, she's kind of getting on my nerves. I wish she would get out of my apartment.
Yes, from Russia.
Yeah. He's kind of like done with her. He's kind of like over her. He's like, I wish we'd get the fuck out of my apartment. And, that kind of like, you never see him like that as human, just like, I want to move on with my life. I'm done with this. We don't get that laissez-faire attitude where he's just kind of like, I'm just going to go out and have some fun, or, I'm curious to see in No Time to Die, with the fact that he's going to be kind of, retired and on leave. If we're going to see like a moment of, real detente with Bond, where he's just going to be like relaxed and having fun and, not a care in the world that we've seen in the books.
You know that answer. You know that answer.
Skyfall, yes and no, because Skyfall at the same time, like we see him post gunshot wound, and he's, in bed drinking the Heineken, but he still looks angry. He still looks angsty. He doesn't look like he's completely relaxed and like he's having fun. He still looks annoyed. He still looks like he's got anxiety. Even with the whole scorpion climbing up his arm and all that.
He's got a death wish.
He's still tense. Like he's not like, he's compare that to, the SNL sketch where he's, just like off the rails completely.
Honestly, good point. It's so much that sketch was just
the one
so
where he's
much
playing
fun.
crabs there.
Yes, and
yeah,
he gets like
that's really funny.
It's over the top, but just seeing him enjoying is oh my god, Daniel Craig can actually enjoy stuff on a film.
But let's bring that into Bond at one point where he can actually, have a little bit of fun without looking like, a stick in the mud, stuck up, typical British person.
I think it's one of those things where when the producers wanted to translate Fleming's books to film, they picked and they chose the things that struck them: locations, girls, guns, and a real badass attitude, which is very frequent in the Fleming books, and it's very frequent in this book too. He's doing some pretty badass things. I mean, scuba diving amongst the barracudas and sharks with a limpet mine on your chest. It's like, I'm not doing that tomorrow.
Taped to his chest. I'm like,
it's quite something. I know.
That doesn't sound safe.
It probably wasn't that safe, but the fuse wasn't in it. He kept, a bunch of fuses in another pocket.
The fuse wasn't in there too. Explosives never misfunction. No, that never happens.
No, never. Especially in the 50s, it's perfectly safe.
I do like the little part when Bond is captured and he's with no, he's not with what's her face? Solitaire.
Solitaire.
They're about to walk up the stairs, and Mr. Big, there are a few people around him. Mr. Big's at the table, and he tells someone to turn off the drums. And the guy just turns off, there's no one really drumming here. It's like a sound system playing this stuff. That was really interesting. That sort of goes back to it's not really voodoo, guys. It's just
wink. But that was disappointing to me.
Oh, was it?
That was disappointing. I would have loved for, Mr. Big just to, have just done a sweep of the hand and two guys in the corner with just big drums would stop. Because that's
movie,
what
they would have done that because it's visually it would have worked. But in a book, I appreciate it. It's kind of a joke. He's a fake. He's a fake. He's just absurd.
But a fake.
I think that it would have kind of held a little more of my attention, not my attention, but I think it would have held more of the belief that the voodoo thing had more hold over the people if he was sitting there in the middle of this cave, just nonchalantly doing, he wasn't really doing anything. He just seemed to be counting money, and he just seemed to be at the desk lazily doing some accounting stuff. It would have been nice if he was just alone in that room with a desk in the middle of a cave with some guy beating some real drums.
It would have been visually striking, but I love the fact that he's, his close entourage know that he's fake and are just sadists, and they put on a show, and that's what they do. They literally put on a show. They turn the tape on, and but I see your point. And visually in a film, that's what they do in the actual movie. They have the ceremony. They took that from that idea. That's the weird thing about the film. It's sort of you take the book, you put it in a blender, you add a dash of Dr. No, because there's a lot of parallel, but the film version of Dr. No, it's puree, and take an episode of The Saint and just smash that together. That's Live and Let Die.
The separation of Mr. Big and Baron Samedi in the movie too is kind of a distinction from the book, because I would have, for me, it works better for them to be the same.
I was thinking about that. We're going to speculate, but do you think that what's his name? The guy, not
of him in the book, but to separate them in the film, I kind of do understand that visually. What's that?
Who played Jeffrey Older? Would he work?
Jeffrey Older.
if you did, oh, my internet connection is unstable. Sorry about that. Jeffrey Older, would he worked as if if instead of separating or creating this alternate identity of Mr. Big and Dr. Kananga, they did an actual Mr. Big that's also Baron Sandy. They cast Jeffrey Older. Would Jeffrey Older held your attention as the main villain? Would it have worked? I'm just now like speculating.
No, Yaphet Kotto all the way. I would have thought if you had done Yaphet Kotto as Mr. Big, as he is in the novel, and cut out Jeffrey Holder altogether, and I have nothing against Jeffrey Holder. He's a great performer. But if you had just kept Yaphet Kotto and kind of done away with kind of that ceremony stuff with Baron Samedi, where he appears and he's all kooky and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, visually it's cool. It's the dancing element, and it's the Jeffrey Holder, performance element.
If you say Baron Samedi to me, because of a Live and Let Die, I know it's a character from I don't remember the name of the Asian sort of cult, but I picture Jeffrey Older. I don't picture this version of that's to the strength of the film, because
For sure.
it just modified.
But that's probably because we've all seen the film and played GoldenEye before reading the book, because we've seen the visual representation of Baron Samedi in the movie and in other media, and then we'd read the book and it's like, he's just a doll on his desk. But if they had really portrayed it in the film accurately, if they were to do, and this is speculation that I've had before, if they were to take Daniel Craig in the next movie after Casino Royale, they had done it really in canon and really, I mean, even if they did Quantum, if instead of Skyfall, they had done Live and Let Die, and we had Bond visiting Leiter in New York, and we had, the Mr. Big Bad Guy, everything would have still worked. They could have still adapted it like they did Casino Royale to modern times, and had a guy play, Mr. Big, and have people believe that he was actually the living zombie of Baron Samedi, because people in 2021 believe that zombies exist.
Michael Clark Duncan was made to play that character. It's a shame he passed away, and it's
absolutely.
Man, when I was reading that, that's what I'm picturing, and that's his voice. He had a magnificent deep voice.
It would have been amazing. Yeah. He would have been an amazing Mr. Big. Had they taken Yaphet Kotto and done it again with Yaphet Kotto as Mr. Big, I would still say yes, 1,000 times yes to that, because I love him as an actor. Yeah. I think he has such a presence, and especially older, because I knew Yaphet Kotto as an actor older in Homicide: Life on the Streets. He was, that's where I had discovered him first, before realizing, oh shit, he's in Live and Let Die. He's got such a presence on that show. And Michael Clark Duncan does have that kind of physical presence and vocal presence as well. There's probably not another actor right now that I can think of right off the top of my head that has that kind of presence for an African-American actor that could pull off a Mr. Big role.
The closest one I can think of is Idris Elba. Not, you know what? He's not tall or big enough. Michael Duncan was like 6'4", I think.
And he was bigger than that. He was like, Shaq size. He was a massive mountain of a man.
Oh, there's our answer. Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaquille O'Neal.
He can dance.
If he could act,
I would say that Shaq.
Yeah, but
have you guys not seen those commercials where he's advertising like the bomb for the muscle pain? Come on.
But the thing is, he's too likable and not threatening, and not really an actor either.
Oh, he's not threatening. I don't think he could keep a straight face through it.
No, he's like a teddy bear. Like it's Shaq. Love it.
But you mentioned The Rock, and I don't think The Rock could do it either, because I think The Rock.
Did I say The Rock? I said Idris Elba.
Well, Idris Elba, I could see him doing it, and I think it would make sense, but I don't think he's threatening enough. Like, I don't think he has, and kind of the roles he's been playing lately, he's been really getting into the kind of the superhero type roles and the Fast and the Furious kind of like, I'm a superhuman, that kind of dilutes his, I can be a powerful dramatic presence, because it's not necessarily, you don't need to be an action star to play Mr. Big. You need to be a dramatic presence. You need to be convincing.
But you still need to be imposing. You don't need to do stunts, do kung fu, but you need to be just a massive block of muscle. You don't need to move, but you need to just be a presence. That's how I pictured it. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
but like a shark.
But I'll argue that Inspector, as much as we might not like the whole Blofeld idea, the whole Christoph Waltz role of Oberhauser, his presence in that film as a villain, if we forget completely the backstory and just his presence, the way his diction, the way that presence on film makes that role for him perfect. If we forget his backstory, if we had taken the traditional Blofeld, put him in another traditional Blofeld role and have him as Blofeld, I think Christoph Waltz pulls it off really well. With Idris Elba, other than being physically fit and handsome, portray Mr. Big well, and that kind of role that he needs to, that presence that he needs to bring to the role of, I'm a cult leader, I control people through the power of voodoo. They believe in what the word that I have to say. I don't know that Idris Elba could do that.
Well, look, we'll call him up. We'll pitch our. We'll do a pitch meeting.
Let's get Babs on the line and rock this one out.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting conversation. I don't know if they'll ever actually make a Live and Let Die movie or
remake
Netflix movie. Yeah, remake. Yeah, that's really actually what I meant to say. Thanks. I don't know. They did bring back Spectre. They did bring back Spectre. Actually, funnily enough,
use the title of the chapter and the plot points that
chapter 5.
Perhaps not that one. Yeah,
you were going to say
the Undertaker win.
You're going to say that. That's a good one. I do like that.
That's a good name for a chapter. I really did like that, kind of those like Jamaican sayings and kind of those things that they added into the book. I think those were kind of a nice touch.
There's
thought
one
about
in Harlem too. There's a wind, isn't there?
I know that at the end
Isn't
there's
there a
another
wind
win after the
in Harlem
Undertaker
as well?
win. The Undertaker win. What am I saying? But there's another breeze that they mentioned.
Undertaker.
I don't remember, but there's something else.
There's a Doctor's wind.
I think
There's
that's
the Doctor's wind and there's the Undertaker's wind. The Doctor's wind is the one in the morning.
Yeah, that's the one they
that brings
mentioned.
in the nice warm air from the sea. That's quite something. And just when it's almost 6 a.m. and the limpet mine, that the clock is ticking and they're walking down to the jetty, that description is really beautiful too. It's an interesting moment of the day to have the finale, sunrise, usually sunset or overnight. No, it's sunrise. It really does add an interesting atmosphere. It's going to be a beautiful day. Yes, boss. It's quite something. It's quite something. I do like it a lot.
I think it's kind of unique to do it like, in broad daylight, as you say, because, crimes rarely happen in broad daylight, or, we seem to think that in if you're going to pull off a big heist, it's in the middle of the night, it's kind of weird to do it in broad daylight like that. And I think it's kind of cool the way they did it like that. I just think that the technology of a limpet mine, like the way it works is you've got an acid that dissolves a metal, and that's what, causes a striker. To have them timed that precisely by the minute, like I understand that there's, some science behind it, but having worked with acids and metal before in a past life, I don't know how accurate that would be, like, I don't think that you can, like, maybe you can, but I just, that's kind of what bothered me. It's like, he's got all these fuses, but they're not, like, for me, a fuse, you would have, it's precise time, like it's golden eye, like it's,
Imagine
and why
the
didn't he
amount
do it?
of people that blew themselves up, make like the prototype for that limpet mine. Okay,
let's try and figure this one out.
It exploded in
This
their
will maybe take 10 minutes. But also, like, why did he wait? Like, let's put the 12-hour fuse on there and just wait it out. Blow that up now. Like, what are you waiting for?
The
Set
5-second
mind-
one's fine. The 5-second one is fine.
Hike your ass back, a couple of
Yeah.
feet, and
Why does he put on the 7-8 hour timer or something like that? I can't remember why he.
I think he's
does that.
trying to save solitaire.
Yeah, no, I think
Isn't
you know
that
what?
why he does it?
I think I know why. Because he was actually thinking of holding his ass back. He gets attacked by the. I might be misremembering, but he gets attacked by the barracuda after putting the limpet mine on, right?
Yeah, or just around the same moment, maybe or really immediately
But
afterwards.
realistically, he would have had a couple. He would have had at least
And he got spotted.
couple of
He
minutes
got
because
spotted also.
he got spotted, but he didn't know he had gotten spotted.
That damn
until later because he
octopus
said, "We
again."
saw your bubbles," because of But realistically, so I got to put a 12-hour fuse. He's got 2 hours of air because he mentions it, a little bit before how much air he's got in those two tanks. So he's got 2 hours worth of air, and it took him.
Sorry.
I think they described in the book as 40 minutes to get to where he was. So why didn't he put a 1 hour fuse and just said, because knowing that I'm going to haul my ass back and it's only going to take me 40 minutes to get back, and then I've got 20 minutes to spare to mix myself a martini, sit on the beach, and watch this thing blow up.
Let's write the letter to Fleming.
I think I remember. I think I figured it out. I got it, guys. I think with the Fleming estate, anyways. No, it's because they know that the Secator, which is Mr. Big's ship, is leaving at 6 a.m. And I think the idea is, well, how about I kill all? I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I'm remembering it better now from the book I read 2 days ago.
A lot of details. It's a long book. It's over 220 pages, man. It's a lot of stuff. But and I know I brought this time and time again in our original reviews, but this is the first book that features one of my one of my favorite flamings is explosions. Whenever Fleming describes an explosion, crashes, lightning, Bond's body and Solitaire's body just lifted into the sky. God, I love it. Whenever stuff blows up, that Fleming is so good. We're next in a few weeks we'll be writing about Moonraker, reviewing Moonraker with another friend of the show, and there's a goodie in that one too. But it starts with the blowing up of the Secator. Oh, love explosions.
He explains it super well in Casino Royale too. I mean, the explosion with the camera cases
that's a good
on
one.
the street.
That's a smaller one.
Really
That's good.
Oh,
That's
it's
a good
such
one.
a good description. I mean, you kind of you get such a great visual from that explosion. It's like, wow.
Episode
Man,
idea:
that
our
guy
favorite
was just
explosions in Fleming.
Yeah,
That's
that'd
gonna
be a
long
good one.
episode.
That'd be a
That's
long
gonna be a
episode
long
because there's
episode.
so many.
It's a two-parter right there.
How about we
Is there
write?
anything else that about Live and Let Die?
I think we've
Please,
kind
Matthew.
of gone through a lot of it. Yeah, Matt, what do you?
You know what? It's it's gonna be interesting when we do sort of all of these books and have sort of perhaps a ranking episode of some sort. But this one, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this time around, and the issues. Let's call it just the issues. Everyone knows what we're talking about with this book. They're there. It's 2021. I'm comfortable talking about these issues, and I don't think this book should be pulled away or removed from print. But some people are gonna have problems with it. If you're
obviously.
If you are, you need to keep these things around, so that people have conversation. That's the power of art. You have to offend a little bit. You can't be sugar and cream all the time. Sometimes you need a little bit coffee or a little bit of martini in your life,
Black
or
coffee?
cigarettes. 70 of them in one day. So yeah, but because it's an adventure. It's a swashbuckling adventure. I think you mentioned it. It feels at time, especially at the end. It's, there's so much allusion to piracy and what's his name? What is it called?
Captain Morgan. Bloody
Captain Morgan.
Morgan's treasure.
Yeah. I was gonna say Captain Jack Sparrow, my mistake. But yeah, no, it's
Captain Jack Sparrow.
It's seeped in Jamaican history. It just, in the description, like I said, the underwater stuff. I love this book. You know what? It's gonna be interesting where it lands in my second ranking. How about you guys?
Final thoughts, Emery?
It's an uncomfortable read in some sections. That's to kind of not gloss over the fact that there's some parts that are really troubling for 2021 to read. Even when I first read it in 2007, I mean, there was still kind of those thoughts. I grew up in a really multicultural school, so like to have people describe them that way, that's not how I grew up with I've had a lot of black friends. That sounds like a weird kind of segue, but I've never had anyone in my life that I know that's talked like this, and I've had African friends and Jamaican friends and etc. And I've never heard anyone talk in this manner. So in the 50s, maybe it was okay for him to describe it. Maybe that's how some people talked. There's a whole different slang that I don't understand today. That some people talk in popular culture that I just completely don't understand. So like that does make me uncomfortable, but it doesn't ruin kind of the pace of the book. I like the story. I like where it goes. The 12 meals of Bond are an interesting subject. I overall really like this book. It's not like a Gardner where I have kind of a mixed emotions of it. I really do like Live and Let Die.
We're thrilled to have brought you on to the show to talk about a book you actually like. Makes for a refreshing change of pace. No, it's a really good one. I like the concept. I mean, ultimately, the gold isn't really the point, but I do like that it's the smoking gun, though. It's that spark that sets the entire plot in motion. There's something particularly old-fashioned about it. Matt, you alluded to the fact that a lot of the book is steeped in piracy, and yeah, it is. There's a lot of that character, that flavor in this book, and it really does add an interesting flavor to the story. I don't need to repeat what you guys said about some of the awkwardness of some of the passages and the wording that Fleming uses to describe certain peoples and certain situations. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't take away from my overall pleasure, great pleasure, in fact, of the book. And I like Mr. Big. I do like Mr. Big. He's not in it a lot. He's got like 2 scenes, really. 3 if you count his death, which is, that is quite a way to die, because he's not quite dead after the second tour blows up. He's still swimming around there until something happens. But I'm very, very impressed with Mr. Big. He's one of my favorite villains, actually. I do think he's really, really awesome.
It's a great one.
Hold on a second, guys. I thought there were just 3 of us in this Zoom meeting. Someone's chatting us something in the chat here. Oh, you must be joking. Well, he never jokes about his work anyways. Mr. White, he's hacked us through Zoom. I thought this was password protected. He's asking, do we have people everywhere? Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation mark.
We do, and I have the business card to read from.
Ooh.
Okay, because I don't know my own social media platforms. Yes, we have people everywhere. We are on Facebook, the James Bond Complex. On Twitter, the Bond Complex. On Instagram, the James Bond Complex. And of course, we are in Anchor. We have a website, the JamesBondComplex.com, which is still to this day actually a Tumblr account, but we'll probably move the thing.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. For those of you who are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever platform that you use. We'd appreciate if you give us a 5-star
Spotify.
glowing, but not regular glowing, golden gun glowing stars. How about you, Emery? Because now you're a part of the family, but you still have your other family.
Yeah, you've been finding my podcast here on the James Bond Complex over the last couple of weeks by now. But yeah, I run my own social media accounts for the 007 Intrepid. So it's 007_Intrepid for Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Facebook as well as the Intrepid 007 podcast. And that's about it. I don't have a website. Well, I do. I want to say I don't, but I do. There's not much on there anymore.
Yeah, we still Univex somewhere.
Univex is somewhere too. Lost in shipping. It's somewhere.
It's
we also have YouTube, by the way. I think did we mention YouTube?
Yes. I need to update those cards because we didn't have YouTube. I need to create new batches.
They're very
cards.
Nice though. They're very, very nice. So just Emery, thanks for as if you're a guest, but thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Well, hopefully we'll talk soon. And
I'm sure we will.
Just as ever, like in 15 minutes after we log off, just as James Bond always returns. We swear to God, James Bond returns. So too will the James Bond Complex. So too will Intrepid 007 with whatever we have scheduled for next week at the time of this episode's release. Sur ce, merci, toujours un plaisir, et à la prochaine.
Bonsoir.
Hasta la próxima. Ciao bello, gamsa hamnida, daum joy bogat samnida.
Hasta la vista.